Welcome to the CAL committee. This is my first full meeting as chair, so bear with me as I'm still learning the ropes, but you're all most welcome. So first of all, can I remind members and everyone in the public gallery to switch off their mobile phones, as it may interfere with the system, and the meeting will be on camera. Also remind members of any matters of financial interest or other interest they wish to declare, and they should obviously make sure that their tablet devices are silent. Apologies. We have apologies from the Chair, Nelson McCausland, David Hilditch and Leslie Cree. Any other apologies? No other apologies, right, thank you. Okay, the next item is the minutes of the meeting of the 6th of November. I think you've all seen a copy. Are we all agreed that they're true and accurate record? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, takes us on to the next item of business, which is a briefing from DCAL regarding progress on the sign language review. Before us will be Martina Campbell, Head of Languages and Waterways, Ireland branch of DCAL, and Tommy McCauley, Manager of the Sign Language Partnership Group, DCAL. Yeah, well indeed.
Good morning.
Morning, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Make yourself at home there and feel comfortable.
Thank you.
We appreciate that it's not easy if you're under pressure. You're most welcome, and I think it obviously advise the members if they're asking questions, it includes myself, to speak slowly. We very much welcome the members in the public gallery and the interpreters. We appreciate the excellent job that they do, and you are most welcome here at the Assembly. So, Martina, do you want to lead off then and do the introduction?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to update members on the review of the Sign Language Partnership Group report, better known as the Roadmap. Can I introduce my colleague, Tommy McCauley? Tommy is the manager of the Sign Language Partnership Group and is the day-to-day contact for all of the groups and other departments. With your agreement, I'll briefly outline the background to the 2010 roadmap and the current review being carried out by Damien Barry of Deaf Answers. We'll then be more than happy to take any questions that you may have. Okay,
that's great, thank you.
In June 2009, a subgroup of the Sign Language Partnership Group was formed to consider the strategic direction and positioning. It recommended that some research and consultation should be carried out among stakeholders to develop a roadmap setting out the strategic aims of the partnership group and its positioning across departments. As a result, in May 2010, Damien Barry produced the consultation report on Sign Language Partnership Group's strategic direction and positioning, which included a 10-year roadmap outlining the way forward. This report therefore became known as the Roadmap and identified 6 key strategic priorities, which were increasing the supply of qualified interpreters and sign language teachers, providing future generations of deaf children with accessible education, providing development programmes to help redress the educational and academic underachievement of deaf people, enabling all services to become accessible to sign language users, raising the profile of sign languages as a linguistic and cultural minority language and a language of need for deaf people, enabling British and Irish sign languages to be recognised as linguistic and cultural minority languages. The roadmap also reported consensus among deaf professionals, deaf organisations and sensory support teams, that the Sign Language Partnership Group should remain with DCAL under our remit to promote Indigenous minority languages. And obviously working as chairing the group and working to influence and encourage other departments to contribute to and implement the roadmap. The purpose of the review of the roadmap is to examine the views of the key stakeholders on the level of progress and identify possible solutions to further implement its objectives and build the infrastructure necessary for equitable accessibility to services for sign language users. The interim review report has been provided already, and at this stage we thought we would have been in a position to brief the committee on the final report, but for a number of reasons there's been some slippage on that. The Department of Employment and Learning is currently funding the training of 11 British and Irish Sign Language interpreters at Queen's and 15 British and Irish Sign Language deaf tutors at Jordanstown. This is an excellent example of partnership and building the infrastructure and capacity to support sign language users under the interpreters and teachers priority heading. Although, as I said, we await the final review, we have been working in parallel with Damien Barry and stakeholders to support and promote the infrastructure. And in the briefing paper we provided you, we outlined 3 key themes, and our funding in DCAL has increasingly been directed at one of those themes, which is the prevention theme. So the 3 themes are prevention, correction, care and protection. And finally then, the key to delivery of the roadmap is obviously getting departments to play their part. We can only encourage cross-departmental cooperation, and through our limited budget we are providing models of good practice and funding of sign language, various sign language projects. So thank you. That's the end of my opening remarks, and we're now happy to take any detailed questions, which Tommy will probably handle.
You're getting a bit difficult bit, Tommy, are you?
Yeah, I do.
That's gone. Thank you. Thanks very much. In relation to the number of sign language users in Northern Ireland, do you have clear evidence of an increase in the number of users?
We don't. I think a figure of around 18,000 is used, and we are working with our own statisticians to get a more robust handle on the number, and I think that would be very important to get clear evidence of the actual number. Tommy, do you want to say any more on that?
Yeah, it is an issue we have been looking at. As Martina says, we've recently consulted with our statisticians with the view to looking into various surveys that may be available to us to extrapolate the actual current numbers. We have been working off a figure of 4,500 deaf sign language users, 3,000 would be BSL users, 1,500 ISL users, and once friends and families and other sign language users are added into that, the figure, as Martina said, does go up to 18,000.
Okay, just generally, having been a member of the Health Committee, what about the Trust? Have they an input into support for sign language interpreters? Health Trust?
Yeah, as I understand it, each trust will have a contract to provide interpreter support that they can draw down on for people who need that support. Also, as going down to the level even of speech and therapy when a baby is diagnosed with profound deafness, their remit is to discuss with the family the various options available for that child. Increasingly, there has been an emphasis placed on trust through various conferences to signpost BSL and ISL more to be used to support the deaf child. There's increasing research that the key years for development of language is between 0 and 2. And it's felt in some quarters, and I think it's fair to say amongst the deaf sector, that that is being missed in some cases. So we are working with the Department of Health to address this. They did fund an early years conference back in March, which was attended by various audiologists, health professionals who work with deaf children, and even the educational support specialists. And one of the recommendations that came out of that was that family sign language courses be used across the health and social care sector. Now, we're waiting an update from colleagues on health on that.
Okay, thanks very much. Over to members, and Karen, I think you indicated first.
Thank you very much, and you're all very welcome here this morning, and thanks very much for your presentation. Just as a parent, I suppose inside looking out here from this committee, I would have noticed an increase in the awareness of children with hearing difficulties through the like of TV programmes like Mr. Tumble. And as I suppose a member of a playgroup and a board of governors of school, that's where I have seen that. Do you think there has been an increase in awareness through the like of a TV programme like Mr. Tumble, and an awareness of deaf, where it has been introduced, where the like of classroom assistants are now taking up sign language classes and learning it, that they're able to pass on that talent then and experience onto people who are in a mainstream school with children with hearing difficulties?
Certainly, as you mentioned, Mr. Tumble is very popular, and I know my 2-year-old is very much into him, and it does raise awareness, with the distinction that Mr. Tumble uses Makaton, which is distinct from BSL or ISL. Yeah. An example of taking your point of childcare professionals showing more interest both within the classroom and playgroup. Last year we funded the National Deaf Children's Society for family sign language courses, which is aimed at families learning early intervention communication with their children. But part of that was a module for childcare professionals, and I think they were oversubscribed. They opened their courses to 60 professionals in total. So there is a demand for sign language amongst childcare professionals and providers. Within schools themselves, we are currently funding the University of Ulster for Martina mentioned, the deaf tutors going through the professional teacher qualifications at Jordanstown. We are providing funding to make the learning environment more acceptable to deaf people through increased deaf awareness for the students there, but also to go into schools with those deaf tutors both on placements and to offer a link up between the university and our schools. And there has been a massive uptake of that. In fact, they are oversubscribed. So to answer your question in short, there does seem to be a groundswell of increased awareness and various other funding streams that we've produced down the years to the voluntary community sector. 600 of their staff in the last 3 years have gone through courses that we funded. So the demand is there.
Okay.
So, and of course, sorry, just to add to that, because some people view sign language as a disability rather than a language of need, there would fall under public authorities' duties under Section 75 and the DDA, of course.
That was just going to be my next point, but you have answered that. So 116,000 comes from DCAL to help your 3 main objectives of prevention, correction and care protection. And you spoke about the work of cross-departmental, the contribution. Could you give us an idea on other contributions from other departments, like maybe education, where it would help you achieve what you're looking to achieve in your 3 main points of the presentation?
I think that's a very key point you've raised, that we have a budget which we've tried to use to our best ability in implementing the roadmap, but we do rely on other departments to pick up and run with the relevant recommendations belonging to them. In terms of other departments' funding, obviously I wouldn't have any detail to hand other than the key department that has provided a huge amount of money is obviously DEL in terms of funding the deaf tutors and the interpreters course. 1.1 million they provided. And I'm not aware of, in terms of education, that is a big factor for the deaf, for parents of deaf children in trying to access help for them. And they tend to be sent down the statement route, which obviously is a time-consuming and difficult process. You know, and the child is missing key, the sort of the basic fundamental elements of their early education. Tommy, do you want to add anything on that?
Sure. Just a bit of background on how, by and large, how a child acquires sign language. It's not through the schooling system, where there are no formal classes of sign language taught. It's not on the curriculum. There will be some teachers of the deaf, as Martina mentioned, in the special education needs certificates, who would come in and provide some communication support. Largely speaking, deaf children whose parents wish them to learn sign language will do so through outside groups like those represented on the Sign Language Partnership Group, which we would fund some of, for example, through the Northern Ireland Deaf Youth Association, through the National Deaf Children's Society, older people through associations such as Hands That Talk and the British, well, not so much the British Deaf Association, but through the deaf sector, basically deaf people will learn sign language. It's not provided for through the educational system. In fact, an example the other day, speaking to a deaf person who's now a tutor, who explained to me how he was sent to Mary Hare School in England, which is a school for deaf children, but it's an oralist school where use of sign was not permitted. So they had like an underground system of signing to each other under the table, but the whole purpose was to teach them to speak English.
Would you like to see the sign language on the curriculum? And what advantage could that bring to the communities?
I think through the roadmap, what we're looking to do is lay down an infrastructure from cradle to grave, so to speak. So we know that the key years for anyone's communication skills acquisition is 0 to 2. So it's important to get in there at that age, because obviously a child in that category can't be taught to speak sign, and parents' voices would be key there. And then obviously the children goes into the education system. There are the statistics there that deaf children aren't doing as well as their hearing counterparts. And there's an interesting statistic came from the World Congress on Mental Health and Deafness that was held in Belfast in September, where psychiatrists, psychologists, educational support experts from around the world attended, that 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. The other 10 who are born to deaf parents generally do better in education because sign language is there from the start. So the evidence is there that we get in early enough, and obviously schools would be crucial in this. The Signature, who are one of the qualification boards for British Sign Language, are looking to pilot a GCSE in British Sign Language in the curriculum.
Very good.
So it is an issue that is live, and we'll, through the review, Department of Education will be involved.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, Karen. Cathal, you're next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Tom and Martina, for your presentation. Martina, you did say that the departmental final review is not yet complete. When do you expect that to be completed, and is there anything in that you would have been useful for our discussions here today?
The review, we expect to get the review report from Damien Barry probably next week, and then we'll obviously have to have a look at that and make recommendations for Minister, and how we would see that progressing is, we think obviously, that we would need, because it's cross-cutting, we'd need to bring that to the executive. And we would hope then that through that process, that would raise the profile of sign language and the needs of sign language users across all departments. In terms of what is in the review, the review concentrated across the themes, isn't that right? And sort of was just like a progress check, but really what it is highlighting is there is still a lot of work to be done in building the infrastructure and capacity. Tommy, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I mean, from the interim report which members will have received, the categories highlighted: interpreters and sign language teachers, for maintaining a sustainable supply of those, education, personal social development programmes, access to public information, BSL, ISL recognition, and raising awareness and profiles. I think the final report will deal with in more detail those categories, what are the blockages and suggestions and how those can be unblocked. And the key here is that we have laid some good ground in building an infrastructure, mainly through the DCAL and DEL funding. But now I think the trick is to maintain sustainable infrastructure.
But Tommy, there are 26 interpreters right across the north here. There's nobody currently been trained in interpreting in the north as such. And we're looking at a deaf population of 18,000, plus all the increasing services that are provided in terms of the public sector, in terms of courts and what have you. And I know from personal experience, when we were looking for interpreters, on occasions it's very, very difficult. You have to book well ahead, and you have to even maybe perhaps work your event around those. But you're saying you're building up an infrastructure, and I think you Martina, said that there was 11 students at Queen's.
11 have graduated from Queen's. 11 have graduated,
so there's nobody,
and they're now in the
there's
system.
nobody at Queen's
Yes.
at the moment. There's nobody at the Queen's at the moment.
No, there's no.
And the other, there's 15 teachers being trained at Jordanstown, and they will graduate in 2016, as far as I'm aware.
That's right.
And then interpreters will not graduate subsequently from that for a further 2 years. There's quite a bit of a gap there within that provision. I'm just wondering, in the interim, is there any, what actions have been looked at providing some sort of postgraduate interpretation courses?
Yes, that's correct. I used the word sustainable on a couple of occasions because that is what we view as key. Going back to 2004, there were 4 interpreters when the sign language group was set up. We're now up to figure, I think, of 27. It was recognised early on that there was no, even if departments bought in to provide all these services for the deaf population, we needed relevant numbers of interpreters and the deaf tutors to teach them. So that has taken time to build and learn. And the big injection was the one-off DEL funding for the interpreters and tutors. To take your point of what can be done now, there is an issue here over how do we keep level both deaf people for deaf tutors and hearing people as interpreters, acquiring level 6. One of our funding streams this year is to the Northern Ireland Deaf Youth Association. They're running a level 6 compressed or condensed course for deaf young people and adults. And obviously that will contribute to the sustainability of students going through for deaf tutor professional teaching. On the other side, I take your point for interpreters. There is no provision for additional funding for example, to fund people who want to take level 6, which is key to go on then to attain their masters in interpreting. Damien Barry, in his interim report, has suggested a postgraduate course at Queen's whereby people with level 3 can go on to that course, acquire the necessary level 6 while doing their interpretive course, but again it's a timing issue. It is an issue that we will be flagging as part of this whole process, which is why we've commissioned the roadmap and the review. We're aware of the gaps. And we're aware also that some people are keen to fund themselves with a little bit of additional support. But in the decal budget this year, we don't have funding for it at the moment.
Yeah. Sure, just fail. Just
Okay.
is there a possibility then of looking, because of the nature of the requirement here and because of the shortcomings, is there a possibility of looking at it on a cross-departmental basis to try and draw down sources from elsewhere, like, you know, if it's not the decal budget, because the decal budget, of course, is quite restricted.
Yeah.
So is there a possibility of going elsewhere?
I think that's one of the things that we will be discussing with Minister, is in bringing a paper to the Executive how we can access funds that would be a pot, a central pot for departments to draw upon. And we will, colleagues in the branch are at an EU funding seminar today, and we are going to see if we can access through the EU funding route any kind of money that we could help the groups or departments draw down as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gaha. Rosa, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. There's a couple of points that I wanted to raise. In the information that was given to the committee, it said that in terms of the census questions, gathering information on the numbers of sign language users, it said that according to the deaf and hearing impaired sector, some of these census questions were open to misunderstanding, and they were critical of that. So given that that's, you know, the people that you want to reach out to and to cater for, how would you respond to that criticism?
I think, and Tommy will keep me right here, I think the purpose of that census question was not to establish the number of deaf people. It was to try and get at the number of immigrants in. So the purpose of the question was open to some confusion, and I think the question was, what is your first language? Isn't that right, Tommy? So some people don't see, it depends, some people don't see the answered that as being sign, isn't that right? And you know, they didn't understand the question. So that's one of the things we're looking at with our statisticians, whether we can get questions in another survey like the continuous household survey. And I think the NISAL survey, is it the Life and Times Disability question, NISAL survey, I can't remember what it stands for, sorry. I can write to you with that. But we're looking there at OFM are thinking of rerunning that survey. So we're looking to see if we could maybe get some specific questions, and in cooperation with the sign language groups, look at the wording so as it's not open to misinterpretation. Do you want to add anything?
If I could add to that just a bit of insight into behind how it was explained to me by some of the deaf professionals in the sector who are profoundly deaf and use sign language. They have been sent through the education system that we refer to, whereby sign isn't taught, and they were taught English. You were taught the oral through it, so they thought, even at their level, they thought, okay, what is this trying to ask me? Does this want me to say then? Because I've gone through the mainstream system and I've been taught English. English is my first language. In the end, they came down, and were 2 of the 339 who said they were BSL users as first language. But it gives an insight into the thought processes of what was going on and how this question was misinterpreted. I would also say that with hindsight, there probably should have been better support for the deaf community for such surveys and polls. On my first meeting with Hands to Talk back in October 2012, it was, I remember being told that they were having a community meeting whereby the pharmacist was going to come in and speak to the deaf people in the town about, you know, prescriptions, that sort of thing. And it struck me then that such community gatherings with sign language interpreter support would be useful for such public polls or surveys. So it's a lesson learnt, maybe for all departments.
So how certain can we be then that the next, you're saying OFM, DFM are going to rerun?
They're thinking of rerunning, yeah.
That sounds a bit vague.
Well, that's at this stage, it's only in the early stages of discussion. We have we've had a meeting with our statisticians. We've asked them to liaise with the statisticians in OFM to make sure that if they are rerunning that survey, that the questions are framed appropriately. That will get us the right answer, if you like. If OFM are not rerunning that survey, we will look at putting specific questions into other surveys which are run on a more frequent basis. Excuse me. And we will work with the partnership group to make sure that the question is framed appropriately.
And how are you going to be sure that those measures will meet the requirements of the deaf, hearing impaired community? So that to avoid future criticism.
Well, the Sign Language Partnership Group is the partnership between the departments and the key deaf organisations. So the deaf sector will be involved in that debate as a matter of course. If it's placed on the agenda and anyone on the group can place any item on the agenda that they feel is relevant, it will have to be discussed and addressed, and there will be big input from the sign language community within that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Rhoda.
I'm not finished.
Pardon, you're not finished, okay.
Tommy and I have been in touch a lot since the last time he was in front of the committee, and I appreciate your assistance, Tommy. And you know the constituent of mine who has been keen to raise the profile of the deaf, hearing impaired community, and I think he's done that extremely well. But also to make it clear that the services and life for hearing deaf and hearing impaired people is way below standard. And I believe it's a health issue that it does require to be dealt with more comprehensively and not left in a department just like DCAL. I mean, there's a role, but I see it in terms of quality of life, mental health, exclusion, isolation, all of those, failure to reach potential, all because someone has a hearing condition, which I think should be dealt with through the health service. So my question is then, what in terms of sustainable and accessible infrastructure to ensure that the needs of people with hearing and issues and deaf problems, to ensure that they will be able to access a sustainable and accessible infrastructure, how would you see that coming into place, and when would we be likely to see that?
Yeah, all of the points you raise are, we would share those views, and we would see DEL, education and health as being our key partners. And I think one of the difficulties was that whenever sign language was assigned to DCAL, it never actually got to the executive because it was under direct rules. The Sign Language Partnership Group was set up under direct rule. So once we get the review report, we will get Minister to bring it to the executive, and I think that is going to raise the profile and put a bigger onus on departments to step up and deliver on the recommendations appropriate to them.
But specific actions like access to the level of classes that are required in my constituent has been trying and being to access level 3 classes, which he needs to be able to communicate properly, because communication is a big issue, and to allow him to progress and reach his full potential. He's a very active person who's been volunteering in the sector and been highlighting the issue of prevention in terms of young people and how they're damaging their hearing and all of that. So this is a person who's out there, but he feels that he isn't being given, you know, there's a quality of opportunity to access the classes that he needs. So
Sure.
I know you've been working with Tommy, but to no avail. Why should he be left without a class? Yeah.
Well, I take your point entirely. Since you contacted me, I've been trying to source various courses, and indeed we managed to acquire a small funding pot from DCAL for your constituent and other deaf people to attend courses. And it was actually going to have to travel from Belfast to Hands of Talk in Dungiven. Unfortunately, because the numbers weren't there for Hands of Talk, the course wasn't financially viable, because it can be an expensive course, and depending on what level you go through, it becomes more expensive. So there is that problem with access, and it's going right back to what I referred to earlier, from cradle to grave. There is a clear distinction, as you know, between our remit to promote and to provide these services, but we have nonetheless provided funding to Northern Ireland Deaf Youth Association. Unfortunately, your constituent didn't fit into their age range where we looked elsewhere. So we do, as Martina said, share your view that in partnership with other key departments, Department of Health for early years health and social care, Department of Education for looking after the needs of the deaf child, to third level education or further education colleges for people with acquired deafness, there is this issue of who funds these classes and can they be done in an economy of scale when we know the numbers are there. So the roadmap was set up as an attempt to address these issues. The review was to kickstart that, take stock of where we've come. We have done some good work, but for example, this one is another example of where there are gaps, and we're trying to plug those gaps, but it is a cross-departmental issue, and we can only do it in partnership with other departments.
How sure are you that those gaps can be filled?
Well, as Martina said, we see it as it's cross-cutting, then it may well go to the executive, and it will be at that level perhaps those decisions will be made. We can't compel other departments to provide such free courses, regardless of our views on it, regardless of the fact that we are funding them for limited numbers through our Sign Language Partnership Group Fund. So the roadmap, I think, is the review of this is to take us to a point where we push through maybe the glass ceiling that we've hit currently and look at access across the whole spectrum of cradle to grave and across all departments.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. Oliver, you're next.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm in a way shocked to hear the information you've come this morning with. I'm chairman of a local disability group, and I've never heard this information before on deaf people. I've got as far as Megaton, and in the schools and that, my own daughter, I was given that at school, but the information that you've told us today, Tommy and Martina, I've never heard before, and it is shocking to think that the public are not aware of that. And I was just reading there on this here, and it really places that section of the community at risk in quite a lot of ways, and at risk of their health, well-being, etc. So I do think that you do deserve all the help you can get. And certainly that help, I'm sure, will be given to you. But if that information, more of that information can get out to the public, you know, there's a lot of misconception about what. I was interested to listen to what you were talking about children going down the road of statement. That is sometimes not the answer.
Correct.
It is the handy way of doing it. And then those children then are put into big boarding school, they're taken away. I was not very interested in that there, because any time you do talk about disabilities, the first thing you get is statements. And you know there is a waiting list to get statemented, and a lot of these children fall between two stools. So I still haven't got over the amount of information you came out with today. I thought I heard a good bit of it, but I've heard nothing when I've heard that today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're waiting on a question there, Oliver.
Well, I think it's more an observation, Chair, than a question, because
No, that's fine, no.
the question being is why has some of the statutory agencies not put out the information that Tommy Martina has given to us today
No, I think it's a good point.
Why have we only heard it here today, you know, because those agencies have a lot of that information and are not giving it out, you know, and I think there's I'm not going to say it's wrong, but it'd be
Okay, thank you.
beggars belief.
Right. Basil, you're next.
Do I pick you up right thinking that maybe decal is not the right place for your remit?
We obviously are custodians, are responsible for promoting Indigenous languages, and Irish and British Sign Language have been recognised as Indigenous languages.
See you up next.
I think we are very proactive in trying to fulfil our obligations, but as other members have said, there is a responsibility in other departments. There is that difficulty in whether or not it's seen and recognised as a disability, or whether it is seen as something around promoting social inclusion.
So if you were advising the executive, where would you place responsibility for sign language throughout government?
Well, I think decal is a very good fit for it, and decal has been a great champion of sign language. And I think,
Sure it has, but are we not saying here that I'm not sure if I got the figure right here, but the budget is £116,000?
it was 116.
Yes, the budget is 85. We've acquired additional resources the past couple of years to take it above that.
So up to 116,000. That seems to me to be a bit of a challenge in decal, but to DHSS, would we not be better? You know, I mean, I'm interested in the semantics here, really, in the language. I have to say that my bit would be a health issue, and should be in health where they have the resources to deal properly with this.
The original report, roadmap report in 2010, dealt with that issue, and amongst the deaf sector came to the consensus that decal was the right department. The reason for that is that the majority of profoundly deaf sign language users see themselves as a cultural and linguistic minority. Quote that I remember being put to me by a member of the British Deaf Association: why are they the only language that has to declare themselves disabled to gain access to their language? So they're very passionate that they are a cultural and linguistic minority. And I think that's the problem from a hearing perspective. If we can't get our heads around the fact that deaf people see themselves as that cultural and linguistic minority, then we just view it as a disability. The Sign Language Partnership Group is just that. It is a partnership, and all partnerships need to bring something to the table. What we're trying to do here is say, yes, we have a limited and modest budget, which we think we've done good things with. There are good models there that other departments can come in and help with. For example, is the Dell one-off funding. But I hope that maybe addresses to some degree why it's with decal.
Well, let me just move on then, and I'll try and ask you a couple of serious quick questions, just because I don't want to take too much of your time. But is the need for sign language growing or waning, given the technology that might be around, you know, voice to text, all of these sort of things? Is there a impetus behind the language or the languages?
That assumes that all profoundly deaf people have a good grasp of English, and that is not the case. Some of the findings around is that a lot of deaf people leave school with the average reading age of a 9-year-old. So again, from a hearing perspective, when I took up this post, I thought, okay, why can't it just be put in front, a leaflet in front of them? Because not all deaf people can follow that in English, which is why we keep going back to the point, sign language is their first and preferred language.
So that's an interesting thing for me to pick up, and I noticed in your briefing about the literacy challenges in that, so that's news to me, and we'll follow up on it. Do you think we've got two signers here, but that's the exception rather than the rule? Do you think that we ought to have a look at maybe doing signing for at least some of the plenary or the question time in the Assembly to maybe explain to people? I don't know what the resource implications are for that, but I do think it would send an interesting message.
That is an interesting, good point, and yes, I would agree with it. And I would go further than that. We're funding the British Deaf Association this year for their Deaf Active Citizenship project, which has various models in it, and it's about empowerment and access to human rights and various training and access to social and international events for deaf sign language users. One of their modules in this year's project is to approach members of the Assembly with a view to having a consultation with you, with signers there, to learn more about democracy and the workings of democracy, to empower them then to, as we encourage through the Sign Language Partnership Group, affect change in policy. So that is something that is ongoing through our funding.
Chair, it might be just worth writing to the Business Committee just to say...
Yeah, we're going to have actions later, but yeah.
Okay, well, just come up on the point that I take your point, Chair, but just for you, I think we should try and at least move that forward. My last question for you is, given that you're in DCAL, how have you been able to exploit the links with culture, arts and leisure? I say that because I had two nieces that swam in the Commonwealth Games for. They were profoundly deaf anyway, and they managed to go and do good things. So there's a link there between sport and some sort of communication. But whenever I looked at the Commonwealth Games and all of the other things that were on recently or whatever, there wasn't that much in terms of reaching out to other people, in terms of community events that a department like Culture, Arts and Leisure might be looking at. So have you been able to leverage any of the benefits of being in DCAL?
Well, in recent years, some of the things that we have done is last year is provide funding to train for profoundly deaf sign language users to become tour guides for the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum. Prior to that, we have also put on a project where leisure centre and sports coaches have access to deaf awareness and basic sign to encourage deaf people to take up more leisure activities. I think there are various other things going on within the arts setup. I don't know the detail of funding, but I believe there is some projects to improve access to the arts sector through DCAL, and it's certainly something that we are currently looking at.
I mean, I think it's...
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and obviously DCAL has had it tough, or will have it tough in the coming years with the budget, and I think we need to be sure that we are levering and using resources to the most effect, but the nature of the review report, because of the different themes, our focus has really been on trying to deliver on the priorities identified and in under the three themes.
And I just to say, I appreciate that you've got to do as much as you can with what
very little money.
What you've got, yeah. and actually, I have to say that the sum of money surprises me about how little it is
and how far it's gone.
And how far it's gone. But I'll also just say, to encourage you, and maybe we'll pick up on it, that there are other, where money is tight, there are other things that you can do in terms of relations.
Absolutely.
And so when people are running culture or arts or leisure activities, particularly if they're funded by DCAL,
yep,
we need to make sure that's, I don't want to be saying anything wrong here, but sign language would seem to me to be the exception rather than the rule in a lot of our public things.
Thanks, Basil. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Internally, as part of DCAL's drive to make sure that there's connections across the DCAL family, Tommy is going to be doing a presentation to colleagues across DCAL on sign language, and we're hoping that through that we will raise awareness, obviously, within the department and make greater connections and try to make sure, as you say, that there's connections right across the DCAL family, whether it's arts or whether it's sport or whether it's leisure.
Super.
Could I just add quickly, I know our friends from Hands of Talk are behind me, and I feel their eyes in the back of my head. And just to say that as part of their project last year that we funded, they provided deaf awareness and basic sign to some leisure centre and lifeguarding personnel in the Northwest.
Very good. Right, thank you. Okay, William, you're next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for your presentation. Martina, twice in your presentation, and then just in the answer to Mr. McRae, you talked about cross-cutting across government, and then recently talking about across the DCAL family. How effective is that cross-cutting approach within the executive?
I think the honest answer is that partnerships and cross-cutting working only work when there's a pot of money. And we can encourage, persuade, influence, but that's all we can do. And when you don't have any kind of stick, nor have you got an incentive in terms of a pot of money that departments can access, it is a difficult task. Do you want to add anything on that, Tony?
The process we're involved in now, the roadmap review, is just that, it is a process. When the partnership group was set up in 2004, as I mentioned earlier, the infrastructure was not there. We've arrived at a stage where it is a lot better, but now we're stock taking to see how we can improve this and how we can invite or encourage, bring in the other departments in more of a partnership and bring in resources to the table in addition to DCAL's resources.
Good.
In terms of DCAL is obviously a small department, and you have a very limited budget, and all budgets are under pressure at the moment. So there's a huge challenge there. Can I ask you, because I think in issues like this, in fact in all issues in government, I think we need to do cross-cutting much better. And not just with regional government, also local government as well. Does the RPA opportunity and the 11 new councils with the greater resource they have provide you with an opportunity as well?
I think that probably is an avenue we would need to look at, and we will certainly take that away and see if we can make any connections through that.
Okay, given the money that you have at your disposal, which is a very limited budget, in terms of consultation with groups, and groups here obviously represented, there are more localised groups, but working with groups like the groups that are represented here, but also the Royal National Institute for the Deaf, British Deaf Association and the Northern Ireland Deaf Youth Association, in consultation with these groups, is there more that they can do? And I'm going to be, and I don't want you to take this, either of you personally, is a government department the best tool and mechanism to actually do what you're wanting to do? Would it be better coordinated if it was handed to one of those organisations, for example the Royal National Institute for the Deaf?
Okay.
I'm just being devil's advocate, will say that.
It's part of this process, and from early on it became apparent that we've referred to the partnership and what other departments can and should bring to the table, but one of the points we've been making to the sector is that we would like to see more consensus, more cohesion within the deaf sector, because bear in mind there are 9 organisations represented on the partnership group. They all have their own constitutions, they all have their view on various parts of deafness. For example, the National Deaf Children's Society deal with very young children up to the age of 6. Accidental hearing loss is deaf with a small d right across the spectrum. We would like to see more consensus amongst the deaf community, and we have asked them for that. Now it is addressed within the roadmap to some degree, and one of the suggestions is for a deaf hub, and we've asked the author of the report then to take that a bit further.
It's because if money is tight and resource limited, economies of scale are vitally important, and there shouldn't be duplication. And I'm not saying there is, but it's important that there isn't duplication, that the money is really focused. And finally, in terms of universities, it was mentioned earlier, Is there an opportunity, has it been explored with the Open University, for example?
No, there's been no contact I'm aware of, certainly not locally, with the Open University. I'm on the steering group of the University of Ulster for their project at the moment for the deaf tutors going through their teacher training. The bulk of that funding came from DEL, as we've discussed, but we're also providing funding for deaf awareness within schools and the university. So we do see an important link where there could be a link up between universities and our local schools. I mean, what we're trying to do is stretch the partnership from where it originally started, which was departments and some small deaf sector organisations. We're now bringing in universities, schools, if we can, because it is across society, deafness.
But you see the point I make about the Open University is simply because it is a track record of actually people not having to travel as much to a campus or whatever, and can be more self-taught and whatever in terms of modules in their own home or in their own locality.
Well, clearly third level education is a matter for DEL, and we will be feeding the points raised by this committee to the partnership group, and we would hope obviously that, as members have suggested, you have a role to play as well in
And that's why
raising
the
awareness.
cross-cutting is so important,
Yes.
because your budget's limited, and because it will affect a number and have an input, or potentially for an input from a number of government departments.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Cathal, I think you want in quickly.
Just very, very briefly, Chair, and I maybe should have from the outset declared not this because I have worked with Anzac grouping before, and I just think maybe perhaps if today shows anything, maybe that there is distinct lack maybe of deaf awareness sometimes on a number of issues, and I think it's something that we maybe actually need to address as legislators in our own right, so that maybe is a work in hand that we should have. I'm getting back to the level 6 training, just think was the costings in that were somewhere just short of less than £3,000 per student per year. Is that right? It's a very, very minimal sum according to my...
I don't have the breakdown of the DEL fund, though.
Right.
I know that some students who have looked to fund themselves, for example, to go to Lancaster.
I'm not even taking that into account, I'm just saying that.
I think I've heard figures of 4,500.
It's a very minimal sum.
Because if you travel, then your travel costs and accommodation have to be added in, so it can rise substantially.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Martina and Tommy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I hope you found that a positive engagement.
We have. We've some food for thought as well, which obviously we will feed into our analysis of the final review.
I think you've done a good
we would
job.
be very happy to come back again.
You've done well in raising the awareness here today, and obviously the engagement is showing that members are concerned. I think it'd be good maybe to even run an event sometime in Long Gallery through some of your groups.
Certainly, we would be
We're
happy to.
continuously lobbied by such groups, but it's one that we haven't had a lot of feedback on, so maybe that's an opportunity. And the Tuesday's a good day for the Tuesday when we get a long lunch, so that we can go and meet such groups. Thank you very much for your contribution, and everyone in the gallery. We appreciate you coming along this morning, and we certainly will do what we can to support your organisation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, members. Peter, on the actions and follow-up actions.
Chair, just as an initial thought, we've Hansarded the session today, and I think as a first action, if the committee writes to and passes the Hansard on to the following committees: Education, Employment and Learning, Health, and OFM, DFM was also mentioned as a cross-cutting committee, but also as a committee for equality. That will be as a first stage. The officials, Martina and Tommy, also mentioned that The report, I think, is completed in a couple of weeks. Now, there's a process it has to go through before it'll come back to the committee. So recommendations need to be put to the Minister and discussed with the Minister. Once those have been settled, then the report with recommendations will go to the Executive. Once it's been to the Executive, then it'll come back to committee. Committee will be able to scrutinise what has gone on there. The other thing I wanted to flag up was when we had the previous briefing on the roadmap, members had asked if I would check with Damien Barry, who's compiling the report, whether there was good flow of information from the departments. That was done, and he said yes, he was getting the input from the departments as he would want, so there wasn't any kind of issue there. I think the presentation has raised a huge number of issues, but it'll be difficult to follow through on some of them until we've seen what the recommendations coming out of the report are. But as I say, in the initial first stage, if we share what we know now with those other committees, and then if there are other actions that members want to bring as well.
Okay.
Chair.
You all agreed with that way forward?
I think Basil had other actions.
Basil, have you any other points?
Chair, I just think it might be worth finding out. Presumably from the Business Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, would that be? I mean, is it?
Commissioners, maybe?
Or maybe,
I think we can explore who exactly would have part of it. I think it's either the Commission, probably, or the Speaker's Office. I'm not sure. Probably the Commission. In terms of, you mean interpreters for Assembly
I
business?
think we should do at least one. This is an attempt to do a plenary session or question to. I mean, whatever is appropriate. But I think it would make an interesting point. So if we could find out who we had to talk to, and then if we could talk to them,
We'll do that, Chair. We'll come back.
That'd be a good thing.
Right, Rosie?
I think it might be a good idea to write to the Health Minister to ask the Minister how seriously he sees the issue of deafness and hearing impairedness as a health issue rather than something left in, decal. Because just in terms of mental health, quality of life, access to ordinary services, I think there's a serious health issue.
There's a strong crossover there, really.
Yes, Chair, we can flag that up with the Health Minister as a precursor to obviously the report's going to come to the Executive, so that lets him have an awareness of the committee's interest in this and the issues that there are.
Good to get the view.
We can also forward the Hansard as well. They can have that too, and we'll be writing to the Health Committee anyway.
William, you're next.
It seems to me, Chair, that there should be correspondence not just with the Health Minister but with Dale and the Department of Education. I am uncomfortable with the fact that language is sitting in a government department that, if this is to be mainstreamed, why is it sitting in the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure? It's a language, and I don't think it should be sitting there. And it's a language that if it's not addressed, people will continue to be handicapped. And the resources, seems very limited. And therefore, I'm not convinced about the cross-cutting thing, because the cross-cutting thing, civil servants, if the department is given in 116,000, they should be able to say what other departments are doing to help, because 116,000 is an extremely limited amount of money. So where's the contribution from the other departments to actually help that? And I'd like to know what that is, but I would have thought it would have been forthcoming, and if it wasn't forthcoming, I would have my concerns that it isn't anything. And I'm not so sure that this can be taken forward by a government department, and particularly a government department with a very limited resource. I don't think that's the best way of this thing being led at all.
Okay,
Yeah, Chair, I think one of the most important sentences that was said that there is a responsibility on MLAs to raise the awareness, and I would support Basil in at least showing that an encouragement for at least one of the sessions of questions time that it would be signed. I think we should be leading the way in that and protect it to happen.
Chair, there's almost an irony here in that I know we found great difficulty today getting interpreters to come, so it's in raising the awareness about the need for interpreters, it's actually really hard to get interpreters to do the things, but we will. But
Chair, there's a whole other thing as well you could open up a can of worms with. Like like the way TV programmes repeat them in the middle of the night for the deaf and not during the day, signed programmes. And also, it used to be the BBC News, and from memory you called her Mary McKiernan, used to have at the end of the news a briefing, and that was signed. And that's all gone away. You know, is that down to cuts? Is that down to, do you know? So that all probably could need to be
I still
explored.
think they do that. There's a called Raymond Abernethy.
They do it at lunchtime. Right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Chair, obviously as well, that the committee's committed to an engagement with the BBC
Yeah.
work stream as well, so that's another issue that can be dealt with through that
Okay.
too.
Good.
We've a number of actions there, and we'll follow through, and we'll bring back the information as we get it.
Thank you.
Chair.
Right, Rosie.
I would actually write to UTV on that issue, because I had a meeting with them last week on, it was an issue to do with the Irish language. They're driven completely by money, by the economics, and they said whenever they had the person, you know, the person doing the sign language, their ratings dropped, and this, and that's what feeds into why they do things, and I think that's.
Chair, we'll explore that as well. We'll write
Okay.
with UTV and see what's going on.
Number of good points have been raised. Okay,
Very
that's,
useful.
thank you. Right, that takes us on to the next issue
Chair.
then. Inquiry into intrusion of the arts of the working class. What working class communities are briefed by City Council.
Chair, while we bring in the officials, can I just remind members we're sitting at active quorum now. I know Mr. Washington's coming back, but if members could bear with us for now until Mr. O'Washington
Is coming
returns.
back?
I don't think so, Chair. But when Mr. O'Washington's back, we're safe. We can still make decisions. We make decisions with 5. We can still listen with 4, but for decisions we need 5.
Yeah.
Can we listen to 5 as well as make decisions?
We can still do that too, yes. Yes,
The
that's
other
still
thing I would
perfectly
say to members is to try and keep your questions focused. Speeches are for the plenary session, not the committee. So just bear that in mind. I think we're all guilty of it at times, but
I just need to leave briefly, but I'll be back. So,
Right.
right.
Okay, Brian and Emer, we're very welcome. On behalf of Belfast City Council, we do appreciate you coming along, and maybe you can talk about tourism as well, but it's not, a lot of us have an interest in it, but not for this committee. But we do appreciate the taking out time coming here. So take it, Brian, you're leading off for us on the presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today, and I'm going to ask Emer, who my expertise is probably more in tourism than culture and arts, so Emer's going to lead the presentation, and then we can jointly answer the questions, if that's okay.
Okay, and thank you.
Thank you. I'm just really going to kind of give a brief overview in terms of where culture and arts sits within our wider council and some of the specific initiatives that we've been moving forward in recent years within council. Belfast is a dynamic, diverse and unique city, and having a dynamic, diverse and unique culture is vital to our success. Culture and arts and heritage create wealth by supporting jobs, attracting visitors and increasing economic investment. They improve our quality of life by creating a shared, welcoming and proud city. Our corporate vision is that the Council, working with communities and stakeholders, takes a lead role in improving quality of life now and for future generations for the people of Belfast, and by making the city and its neighbourhoods better places to live in, work in, invest in, study in and visit. The development of the city's culture and arts is central to this vision and is at the heart of our overarching plans for Belfast's future. Broadly speaking, culture is the impact people have on each other and on the environment which they live in. Culture also helps distinguish between individuals, groups and societies. For the purpose of developing our cultural policy within Council, culture is defined as the quality that makes Belfast distinctive as represented through arts and heritage. In October 2012, we launched a new cultural framework for the city, which sets out our priorities for action and funding.
Hello, Chair. We've lost all quorum now. Unfortunately, we have to suspend the meeting with just 3. So I'm going to suspend very briefly while we retrieve a 4th member.
Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Our vision for culture in the city is that by 2020, everyone in Belfast experiences and is inspired by our city's diverse and distinctive culture and arts. Arts and heritage are valued by enriching quality of life and creating wealth, and the city's culture and creativity is renowned throughout the world. The framework was developed following extensive consultation with the sector and other stakeholders, and it has been positively received to date. Actions in the culture framework are arranged under 4 key themes. Firstly, Distinctly Belfast. This theme is about creating and supporting high-quality art that reflects Belfast's unique character, is culturally relevant and resonates with our residents, their interests and tastes, and attracts and nurtures artistic talent. Inspiring communities. When we were developing the strategy, members and other stakeholders told us that the people of Belfast must be at its heart and that everyone in the city must have the opportunity to engage with high-quality arts. However, some people and communities are harder to reach than others and are less likely to engage with the arts, and we accept this. The theme is about providing opportunities for and removing barriers to participation, including among priority groups such as young people, older people, disabled people, minority ethnic communities, and people living in areas of disadvantage. Our third theme is attracting audiences. One of the most critical challenges for the cultural sector is to engage with, retain and develop new audiences. This theme aims to increase both local and visiting audiences for the arts and promote Belfast as a dynamic, creative and cultural city. And finally, the fourth theme is strengthening the sector. The market alone will never wholly support the arts sector, which is one of the reasons why it relies on our public subsidy. However, the sector is peopled with enthusiastic and inventive fundraisers who work hard to sustain and grow their businesses. This theme is about working with them to share knowledge, expertise and opportunities to diversify their income streams. In terms of what we hope this will achieve, we hope that participants will have an increased sense of community and civic pride. We hope that participants will have an increased understanding of other cultures and communities, that Belfast will be more engaged and active as a city, that everyone in Belfast will be aware of Belfast's diverse culture, arts and heritage offer, and that we will have a strong arts and heritage infrastructure. The framework makes clear that the Council funds the arts because they improve quality of life and have an economic dividend, making Belfast a better, more prosperous and successful city to live in, work in and visit. However, this does come with the recognition of both the instrumental and intrinsic benefits of the arts. The Council considers that high quality arts is likely to have a greater impact when it is reflected in our core values of quality and equality and embedded in our funding processes. Different arts organisations have different aims, priorities and areas of expertise, creating a strong arts sector. Our funding encourages organisations to work to their strengths, whether this is inspiring communities or attracting audiences or strengthening the sector, rather than a blanket approach that requires all arts organisations to address all agendas. So what do we actually fund? Belfast Tourism, Culture and Arts Unit invests in the arts through 3 main funding schemes. We have core multi-annual funding, which supports 52 organisations in the city, with support for their core programme of activities over a 3-year period. We also have project funding, which provides up to £10,000 per organisation per year to one-off Belfast-based activities. And with the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure, we administer the Community Festivals Fund, which provides up to £10,000 per community festival. In 13-14, the sector benefited from an increase of 25% in our funding to the cultural sector, bringing our investment to £4.5 million over 3 years. This funding currently attracts an average annual audience of 4 million people, 140,000 participants, 300 full-time jobs, 130 part-time posts and 4,000 artist contracts. However, all council funding schemes are oversubscribed and only a third of applications for project and community festivals funding are successful, and the amount of funding requested is almost 5 times what we have to give out. So in terms of access to the arts, we recognise that we must continue to work to increase access to the arts, and while this is a key criteria embedded into the approach to culture and arts in the city, for example, while there may not be a venue on every doorstep, and I think this was one of the things that the original piece of research that informed this inquiry noted, there are arts organisations spread throughout the city. Furthermore, the location of an organisation does not always correspond with the location of the work that they do or the participants and audience that they access. All core funded organisations have a catchment area greater than 1 ward, and many organisations have at least a city-wide catchment area. Organisations applying for funding to Belfast City Council are also given an opportunity to demonstrate how they inspire communities. While the amount of and approach to outreach work varies considerably across organisations, we estimate that 80% of funded clients programme outreach and audience activity as part of their core programme, accounting for 94% of our total funding budget. This includes 31% of funded organisations, which could be classified as mainly participatory arts, including community arts, which have access and participation obviously at their core. The Community Festivals Fund is another example that provides funding for festivals that are designed for or by geographic communities or communities of interest. And again, this is something that you need to note when considering research, because often this type of activity isn't captured by that research. Community Festivals is also one of our most oversubscribed funds, and many more festivals are run across the city without this funding. So what about cultural engagement and social inclusion? Does it really work? The Council does carry out independent evaluations of specific projects to assess success in increasing social inclusion through cultural engagement. And in particular, we did 2 pieces of evaluation around 2 Piece 3 funded programmes. The evaluation found evidence that there is a causal link between cultural engagement and greater social inclusion, and concluded that as a result of the programme delivery, outreach projects have affected attitudinal change in participants, including an increased awareness of and a willingness to engage with culture and arts activities, a willingness to go outside their own area, and in cross-community working, an increase in respect and understanding between generations and cultures, an increased knowledge of the history of their communities, and a willingness to share their experiences. So I mentioned that we specifically have an Inspiring Communities theme within the framework. Our corporate plan recognises that our people and our communities are the lifeblood of our city. Engaged and active communities are not the byproduct of a successful city, they are a prerequisite for its success. So in the development of the framework, councillors and other stakeholders emphasise that engaging communities across the city must be a priority. And this theme is all about connecting the diverse people and communities of Belfast to its rich culture, arts and heritage. Community arts and audience development all create opportunities and encourage people to learn new skills. It is a significant achievement in its own right to do this, but these activities also help to grow audiences for the whole cultural scene. So in particular, under Inspiring the Communities, what is it that we're aiming to achieve? We want to remove barriers to participation. We want to enable people to value and understand their place. We want to develop shared cultural spaces, and we want to target areas and communities with low levels of engagement in culture and arts currently. So core funding of the arts is undoubtedly vital in achieving this. However, we also recognise that additional longer-term interventions are absolutely required when it comes to lasting impact and reaching new communities. So what did we do? In September 2013, we got together with the Arts Council to launch a new landmark fund for the arts and heritage called Creative and Cultural Belfast. This fund was created in recognition that while culture and arts should inspire us, bring us together and teach us about ourselves and others, that there are undoubtedly some people and communities that are less likely to take part, and that this can in part be due to lack of economic opportunity, educational achievement or other barriers. So Creative and Cultural Belfast specifically seeks to challenge social exclusion by providing everyone in Belfast with the opportunity to experience something new. Applications had to demonstrate how projects supported our framework, and in particular they had to be cross-community, cross-city, delivered in partnership between the cultural sector and the community sector, and directly benefit hard-to-reach areas and communities, including people who had never participated in arts before. Most public funding is tied to one financial year, and this is where this scheme again was different. The level of partnership working and community engagement that was required meant that we delivered 18-month to 3-year programme. The total investment was £900,000, shared equally between the 2 main funders, but unfortunately again we had 12 times the amount of interest in this fund than we had funding to give out.
Sorry to interrupt, are you getting near the end?
Yep.
That's fine, yeah. Go ahead. Just in time,
Yeah.
With coordination.
So that was our 4 projects were announced in March 2014, and we'll be announcing a further 3 projects under this scheme in March 2015. So to conclude, we would like to make a number of recommendations for improvements in policies, delivery mechanisms and collaborations among key stakeholders, including ourselves as Council. We would like the arts policy and funding recognise that different arts organisations have different aims, priorities and areas of expertise, and that different art forms appeal to different and diverse range of people and communities. We also would like that policy should be based on sound evidence, and if working class communities are to be targeted, this needs to be based on research demonstrating the need, as well as a clear definition of who the target groups should be. This research should look at the sector holistically and take into account diverse audiences for non-ticketed activities and in non-traditional arts venues. All interventions should be based on best practice and targeted at those organisations that are best placed to make a difference. We should recognise that there's a wealth of arts activity already programmed across the city, and we need to make sure that all our residents and visitors are aware that this currently is taking place. More funding undoubtedly should be made available to support bespoke development initiatives over longer periods of time, and this does take more money. Finally, projects should benefit from longer-term development and evaluation. Community groups are sometimes concerned that approaches from arts organisations are tokenistic, while arts organisations are concerned that genuine, sustainable partnerships cannot be built within a 1-year funding cycle. Benefits may also not be realised until several years into a project, so again, we must look at research over longer periods of time. We thank you for the opportunity to present, and we'd welcome any questions.
Very good, thanks very much. Apologies for cutting you short, but we do recognise your enthusiasm for your job. I'll start off just a couple of points. I understand from the briefing so far to the inquiry, I'm just a new member here, but I understand that one of the big issues is about transport for schools and for groups to attend events. I suppose it's not just arts events, but arts events obviously in relation to this. My other point is arts. What are the arts? Is there an issue here about the perception of how people see the arts? And is it something that is of benefit to working class communities? And how do you break that perception down? And how do you make it attractive to everyone? Are those barriers that you've had to come up against? So I appreciate your comments on those couple of points.
Okay. I suppose there is clearly the issue in terms of cost of transport for schools, and we would recognise it in a much broader sense than there is culture and arts. And it is something I know even in the council agenda, one of our key sort of objectives is about moving people across the city and trying to see how we do that better. So we're working with TransLink on the public transport side, but on the schools side it's probably a bit more ad hoc, and council's role in that. But there's definitely an issue there in terms of the schools' budgets tighter than ever. That's obviously one of the things that could obviously be the
challenge.
Absolutely. In terms of perceptions of art, we would have that even within council and within our development committee.
Even within members, yeah.
To an extent, I think part of our challenge is to sell that again with members that culture and arts isn't just we termed highbrow events. It's the broad spectrum, and a lot of the festivals and events and a lot of the arts organisations would really think. If there's something in Emer's presentation, there's a genuine effort from our side, and a genuine effort. It's not piecemeal or tokenistic. I met with Mr. Humphreys on a number of occasions around some of the events that they would organise in the Shankill. But there is that perception issue. A lot of events and festivals are a good way of engaging with the community, and as Emer said, a lot of the figures that we've got don't. Because we're looking at ticketed systems, don't really reflect how the general public engages with the arts at all sorts of different levels. So in a long-winded way, perception is definitely an issue, and something that we sort of, as one of the barriers we recognise.
I mean, I would say from my own experience, you need to be careful not to put too much an emphasis on transport. Before I came to council, I worked in theatre for children for 8 years, and a lot of our work was delivered directly in schools, as well as obviously bringing kids out into the venues and art centre. And I think that there are greater barriers that need to be addressed. I think in terms of transport, first of all, there are a number of venues that are on people's doorsteps, and you find the arts in all sorts of unusual places. It's not a case of having to get a bus into the city centre to go see something. And I also think it's about building relationships, certainly with the school sector. It's about building relationships with teachers so that they understand the role and the real value that the arts can play in terms of them delivering to kids and their kind of education objectives. So I do think that sometimes kind of transport, the cost of transport can be seen to be a major barrier, but I definitely think that there are other barriers that should be a priority when you look at what needs to be addressed.
Okay, thanks very much. William?
Thanks, Chair.
Your name has been mentioned, so you're going to have to address some of these issues.
Thank you both very much for your time here today and presentation. And as a former chair of the Development Committee, I should declare that in City Hall, I very much know and value the work that you guys do. Emer, you mentioned transport. We've actually had evidence from a number of groups across the city which would go against what you've just said. And I appreciate you from the background you come from. So, for example, the New Lodge arts people were saying that if they had more transportation, they could take more people to the MAC. Now, although I would share your point, it's not that terribly far away from the New Lodge, but we've equally had the same point from Spectrum. We've had the same point made to us at Lyric, when we were at Lyric, that they struggle to get people to come because of bus routes and so on. So just make that point to you. In terms of questions, can I ask you, there's always a challenge from councillors about protecting frontline services, and the sort of stuff that you're doing is an add-on and whatever. In terms of the cost to ratepayer, can I ask you, I mean, Belfast led the way in terms of a European unit, excellently led by Laura Leonard. Have you been able to access money from Europe to help you with the sort of work you're talking about?
I mean, I would say that especially this type of work, the majority of it is funded in partnership with other funders. So the best practice examples would be Creative Legacies and City Festivals. And as I mentioned in the presentation, they were both Piece 3 funded programmes. So absolutely. Creative and Culture Belfast, which is the big flagship project that we're driving at the moment, the Arts Council puts in the same amount of money that we put in to deliver it. So I would say that yes, we've had success and we are continuing to look. And obviously a new Creative Europe's just come online, and at the moment we're working up what our bid for that will be. And obviously we're waiting to see what the priorities under Piece 4 will be as well.
Yeah, and ignore any negative comments you might hear from the chair. Then maybe you didn't hear, which was good. Is there a greater focus?
No, just about Belfast getting everything really going.
I thought it was the Northwest Chair.
If you don't ask, you don't get. Is there a greater focus, or could there be a greater focus on some of the, I mean, I represent, when I was in the council, some of the most deprived wards in the United Kingdom. Can there be, or has there been more of an emphasis from council on targeting wards where there are huge socio-economic difficulties and high levels of unemployment and poor education attainment and so on?
I mean, I would say that the creative and cultural, that was some of the criteria. So if you look at the projects that are funded under that, for example, we're funding a project with some of the most deprived areas of East Belfast, working with very young children and their parents through Sure Start. We are doing a project with Golden Thread Gallery, with North Belfast Interface, and also with the Lower Shankill Community Association. So those projects are specifically targeted at some of the most deprived wards in the city. And similarly with the European funded stuff, that was absolutely critical to the criteria. So the organisations that were funded were those that could demonstrate that they were directly going into those communities, reaching those beneficiaries. Okay. And similarly with Community Festivals Fund, a lot of that's delivered directly in those communities.
And finally, can I ask you, in terms of community festivals, you said that you were hugely oversubscribed, and I know that's always the case. Can I ask, because, is there a balance across the city, across the cultures and across the community with the allocation of these funds?
I would say, across our sort of broad range of funds, we constantly sort of monitor that. It's not something that we, I would say, proactively go out and try to make sure we have an equal number from each jurisdiction. When we've done our research, clearly the vast majority of the organisations operate completely across the city. So while in the east there are only a small number of our core clients are actually based in the east, and the activity that's delivered by the companies from north, south and west typically roll out across the city as well. So very mindful of it. We don't have a parameters in there in terms of making sure that organisations from each area are equally represented, but the activity we make sure whenever the projects are rolling out are across the city.
But when you're monitoring it, I think you have to remember as well, Brian, that there are groups who have huge capacity, and there are other groups that don't have any capacity and won't, if they're locked out, or it's a closed shop to them, because the groups that have the capacity apply and continue to get. How do these new groups that may be formed, new communities that we have in the city, for example, how do they get in and get their share of the cake if those with the capacity continue to get it? Have to be ever mindful of that.
I would say, as Emer said, the processes are very competitive. So, as you say, people become more sophisticated. They've become more sophisticated to get the funding. So the applications, there's a really high sort of a threshold in terms of what's scored. We do have a strengthen the sector theme in the cultural framework, which is about trying to build capacity. We've identified different parts of the city where there are capacity issues when you look at where the applications are coming from. So as officers, we work very closely with, and if we're approached by groups, we will come out and work with them in terms of trying to build capacity and enable them to be ready for when we start our next round of core multi-annual funding, which will be equally competitive again, but just to make sure that it's not the usual suspects, that we try to give opportunities to as many organisations.
Well, I welcome that, and capacity, or the lack of capacity, is a huge issue. So thanks again, and thanks for your time.
Okay, thanks, William. Karen?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I'll be brief, so I'm going to put a couple of questions in together, because I know that we have time restraints here this afternoon. 1 in 4 of the applications is recommended, goes forward the recommendation for funding. And you talked about the quality of the application and the scoring of that. What's the council doing? And there's a possibility for a high risk there's the same groups getting the money year in, year out. So can I ask what Belfast City Council is doing to encourage groups that maybe have difficulties in travelling to venues outside of their areas to apply for funding, so that the community itself is having it at their doorstep? But what are you doing to encourage that? Are you giving them help with application forms, etc.?
In terms of the linkage, we very deliberately roll out the workshops that we do in each part of the city, so north, south, east, west and Shankill. Very deliberately roll out workshops in each area, and the turnout is very good in terms of the number of groups coming along, but again there's probably marked differences between each area. So, and we've learned probably the venues we've used over the last 2 or 3 years how to make sure we get more people going along. In terms of those capacity issues, as I said, we would if we're approached by a group, we will go out as officers. Each of the officers are champions for the groups that we work with, but we keep adding to that list, so we'll go out and work with groups to try and bring them up to a certain level. I mean, the Arts Council have their core funding as well for groups, and it's very important in terms of group sustainability to get some of that core funding. The project funding is fine, obviously, like the likes of CFF funding, which is very much targeted at sort of community festivals, and it's a different sort of set of parameters. So I would say that there are opportunities there already, but we're keen as officers to work with the groups to try and upskill them and build the capacity. And through our strength in the sector, we have a budget in place there that if there are specific initiatives that we recently did research of a lot of the groups that we work with to see what their issues were and where, because obviously in the light of funding cuts they have difficulties, and where can we really help. So we're asking the sector what can we do, and then we're responding to that, as opposed to just us sitting.
We have made considerable changes. So over this past 18 months we've changed, so the administration of grants sits separate so that we as officers are development officers, so our job is to develop art in communities in the city. So we work geographically, and we also have a number of organisations that were the dedicated officer. So those 1 and 4, the 3 people that weren't successful, we'd follow up with them. We'd look at other ways that they can access funding. We'd talk to them about how they need to improve their application for next time, and we do work closely with them to try and build their capacity.
Have you seen an increase then in that?
We have, and there's a number, you will see a difference in terms of the number of new groups that are coming through. And obviously that is absolutely what we want. We don't want the funding to always go to the same groups, but in order for it to go to new groups, we need to work with those new groups to build their capacity.
Okay. The other one just want to touch on is the EU funding for, you've tapped into it, and could you just share your experience in that, on how you were able to sell the arts to EU? Was there any difficulties or any positives?
I think EU funding is absolutely positive in terms of what it enables us to do and what extra enables us to do. But it is very difficult funding to access, and it's extremely difficult and time-consuming funding in terms of administering it. We obviously try to keep the majority of that burden on us in terms of the administration, so that makes it a more attractive proposition for the organisations that are delivering it on our behalf. So in terms of across the city, it's been really positive. Some of the best feedback that we've ever got are projects that's associated with EU funding, but it does take a lot of dedicated resource to get it and then to manage it.
Okay.
I would say too, we're tapped into a lot of European networks, which makes it easier. So you start to see applications developing where partners have already started coming together. So whether that suits the city agenda, then because we're in those networks, we can tap in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Oliver, next.
Chair, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's quite obvious you must have a very good team behind you there accessing all these grants to bring down all this money. So, congratulate you on that. Is it possible these groups who did come here before, who did express a difficulty on transport, is that they are really relying on the transport thing too much and not looking more at the arts or whatever it is they're doing? Because yourselves don't see that as a problem, quite evident from this delivery today. So is that possible that they could be looking at it a different way, and these groups that do express this, who have expressed this difficulty here in different presentations to date, has that been a major thing in your follow-up to groups who get funding and to groups who don't get funding? Has the transport issue been up there in a lot of their priorities, difficulty in accessing the arts or anything at all?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to give exact percentages, but certainly in terms of my experience of assessing applications, not that many applications that directly ask us to cover transport costs. And yet in certain circumstances they are eligible. I'm not saying that transport isn't an issue or a barrier, but I think it's part of a bigger mix and part of a bigger problem. And I think that there's lots of stuff that you overcome transport by taking stuff directly into the communities. And then also there are a number of free activities, which means you don't have any ticket price, so your only cost is to get somebody there. So I know that that's the type of things that I would have done previously. I would have offered free events because I could take that cost myself, and then the only thing that the schools needed to do was pay for their bus. It's when you have a bus and a ticket price and then need to think about lunch and everything else to take a school out for the day, that's when it becomes just not feasible.
Okay. Dale, no, Chair. Do you have any type of matrix or anything where one group doesn't receive funding all the time, that sort of thing, or do you look at it in a group that is really bringing benefit into the city, you know, with a community festival or something like that there, that it does get funding? Because the question was raised there, maybe some of these groups, the bigger groups are getting the bulk of the funding or all of the funding, there's nothing left for any of the smaller ones.
there's definitely an issue there, I know, and typically you will find with the grants that we distribute and other organisations distribute, the same names come up quite a lot of, same groups come up quite a lot of times because they've built their capacity and they're good at filling in applications. And I mean, our community festival fund, which you part fund, allows us to be a bit more discerning, and the parameters are different from that than they would be from our core funding. But I would say it is partly a problem, but because of some of the organisations have grown, have developed over time, become more sophisticated in their grant applications, we don't really say, well, you got from that pot, you can't have from that pot. It's all down to the quality of the application.
There is no historic funding though, in that every application is considered completely fresh, so we don't take into consideration previous applications. So people's funding can change considerably from year to year, and you can go from being really successful to unsuccessful and vice versa.
And the last question, Chair, is there such a thing as an overlap? I know, I think you know where I'm coming from on this one, that a lot of these groups coming in, there is an overlap because, you know, you may have a group there and you have smaller groups coming in. Really, if they got their heads together and been one group that are overlapping each other, is there a question of overlapping on applications or overlapping on funding?
I mean, I know that obviously with the current cuts, the Arts Council is making quite a big priority in terms of organisations having to look at how you share resources and how you share funding. I think what some of the funds that we've done is encourage. I don't think we're ever going to say that organisations should merge and that they're, you know, organisations have very distinct and separate roles, but absolutely what we encourage is to access funding, work in partnership, because your impact can be greater. And I think you will see lots of really successful examples of that in the city, where organisations are distinct but they've come together to access money and deliver some really good projects.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say if we would work quite closely with the Arts Council to make sure that whatever their fund priorities are, ours add value as opposed to in terms of an overlap there. So we had a really good session with them last week where we talked about just making sure that we're lined up and we're not trying to do the same thing. You know, we have our distinct role as well.
That's grand. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Rosie, you're next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Can I just ask, given the commitment of the City Council to cultural diversity, how does the Council encourage and support the Irish language, and how do you make Belfast City Council a welcome place for Irish speakers?
If I'm honest, I probably couldn't answer that. It probably falls outside the remit of our unit. But we could come back with a response on that. But
we do support a number of Irish language projects through our funding, and actually one of the big project that got the £300,000 under Creative and Cultural Belfast is a collaboration between Culturalin and Spectrum Centre, and it is a bilingual project, and it has been funded as such. So yeah, and there are a number of small projects, and equally we do fund a number of Ulster Scots projects under project funding as well. So they're absolutely considered with the same merit. All the different kind of cultural diversity projects are considered with when they apply for funding.
Purely down to the quality of their applications in each case.
But you will maybe be aware that the Irish language has a particular place in terms of its recognition under the European Charter. There are also thousands of Irish speakers in Belfast, not to mention beyond. I'm just wondering, how welcome would you say Belfast City Council makes those people feel? I'm not putting you responsible, but what's your sense of that? I'm not actually getting a very positive response, actually.
I mean, certainly my sense of it in terms of coming into the council within culture and arts, I think we recognise that language is a really important part of people's cultural identity across the board, and I think that we fund some really good and exciting projects, and absolutely we support those proposals. In terms of any kind of wider policy, I would have to say,
be
aware of it.
From sitting at council meetings and committee meetings, I don't sense any. I think it's a very respectful environment, and I don't I don't sense any negativity towards language in any shape or form. Just from my workings and dealings on a daily basis and being in committees, and like I say, I find committees very functional and being very respectful of people's opinions.
Okay, well, you're obviously not aware then that Belfast City Council's been in court this week over its policy on bilingual street signage.
All I can say is just on my experience of Belfast City Council.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for your contribution. Very much appreciated. I think it's been very useful, and it will be obviously part of a contribution towards our report, and no doubt you'll be getting a copy of it in due course. So thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Okay, members, the next briefing is from the Irish Bowling Association on participation, or the lack of it maybe. So we'll try and keep it moving. It's fairly sharp, please. Look at these people.
Yes.
Three members are here, yeah?
Yes.
3 reps.
Yes.
You away?
We're okay if anyone wants to step out we've got numbers. If anyone needs to take a break, we have numbers sufficiently for them to.
I won.
Just a bit, just getting it fine.
I have a group with on.
We'll try.
Yeah, I'm afraid. What's left there?
Yes, I'm just very sure.
Yeah. Sorry.
Afternoon, gentlemen. You are very welcome to the CAL committee. I do trust you'll feel at home and not under any pressure whatsoever. And we look forward to your contribution. With John Miller, David Graham, and Colin Campbell.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I take it, John, you're going to lead off, are you?
Yes, Chairman.
I appreciate a short contribution and then the time for questions from members. Thanks very much.
Just to give a wee overview of my document that I submitted. We represent the Irish Bowling Association, which is the men's association, really. The clubs do have female members. The association was founded in 1904. We are the governing body of bowls in Ireland. In Ireland there are 4 associations, 3 in the north, 1 in the south. The geographics of it are the 3 associations in the north. The largest one would be the Northern Ireland Private Greens Bowling League. As the title suggests, they are private clubs, mostly who have their own facilities, maintain their own clubs and bowling greens. And they are mainly in the Greater Belfast area. However, they do spread down as far as County Down, Bangor, Newtownards, over towards County Armagh, Guildford, up north towards Randallstown, where I come from, Ballymena and Larne. The other association in the north is the Northern Ireland Bowling Association. It is mainly in the Greater Belfast area. However, they do spread outside Belfast. They're confined to public parks which are owned by the local councils and local authorities, so they maintain their greens and clubhouses for them. They go down as far actually as Newry, Westbrook, Dungannon, Portadown, Lurgan, etc. So there's a wee spread there as well. The third association is the Northern Ireland Provincial Bowling Association, which is in the northwest area of the province, stretching from Ballycastle to Londonderry and down as far as Cookstown, Magherafelt. Again, that is an association where there's about 3 private clubs within that who own their own greens and maintain their own facilities. The rest would be on council properties in that association. Then the fourth is the Bowling League of Ireland, which is based in the Greater Dublin area. And they again would be private clubs, similar to the Northern Ireland Private Greens League, where they maintain their own facilities. So the 4 associations play their own league structure. They organise their own leagues within that there. They also have their own championships, and they provide players for that which come forward to our championships. And we host those every year. The winners of those championships go forward to play in the British Isles championships, which can be in England, Scotland, Wales, or in fact in Ireland. It rotates on a 4-year basis. We would also have our own international teams, junior and senior. The junior team is under 25s. The senior are obviously older players. They play off each year, or they're selected each year, and they play against England, Scotland, and Wales for the British Isles Championships. In fact, this year the juniors were held in Belfast, and I believe your previous chair was at those championships, where the under 25s were held at Belmont. Last year we held the seniors, which were held in Dublin. So it rotates on a 4-yearly basis for the championships. We also select elite players from our panels. They go forward to represent the Irish Bowling Association at the world events, such as the World Championships. The next one will be in 2016 in Australia, Commonwealth Games, also the World Cup. There's the Dutch Open, Hong Kong Classic, which is on at present, and the World Junior Championships, which are on at present. A lot of these competitions are in the Southern Hemisphere, and that incurs a bit of expense, obviously, for that there. As regards our successes are, as you see on this I submitted there, they are at more of an individual level in singles, pairs, triples and 4 events, where we have been very successful over the last number of years. In fact, at the World Championships, we obtained 2 bronze medals in 2012 in Australia, which was a tremendous feat. The Commonwealth Games, we have medalled consistently over it since 1982 championships. In fact, in Glasgow there just recently, we obtained a silver medal in the triples. And in the British Isles, we have had the singles winner the last 3 years, plus the under 25 singles this year. So individual level, we can certainly punch above our weight. Where we seem to struggle a wee bit is with team events, where the larger numbers, because each team comprises of 24 players. So that it's a bit if we haven't just got the strength and depth in comparison to England, Scotland, or even Wales. The challenges that we see facing the association obviously are the membership, where membership's going down. Therefore, the clubs are struggling at that level. And also the costs, where we have limited funding. Everything's getting more costly. Membership's getting costly to run clubs, for them to upkeep their greens, etc. So that's a big problem. And we have maybe a problem as well with the perception of the sport, media-wise, where most people say, "Well, that's an old sport." But we're trying to improve that image, obviously, by getting in touch with clubs, and I'll lead on to that later. Just as a wee final thing, the other thing in my presentation there was the IBF, the Irish Bowls Federation, which was founded in late 2013. This was initiated by Sport NI because of the funding that we received from them. They wanted the 4 governing bodies in the north to come together, and therefore the ABF is like a post office which distributes then the funding to the 4 associations, which comprises of the ABA ourselves, Irish Bowling Association, the Irish Women's Bowling Association, which is the ladies outdoor, and the Association of Irish Indoor Bowls, which is the men's indoor, and the Irish Women's Indoor Bowling Association. When I say indoor, I mean the stadiums such as the one at Shaw's Bridge, or there's the one at Parkgate, or the one at Ballymoney, not the short mat bowls, which some people may have heard of. It's the longer green bowls we refer to. So those 4 associations gain the funding from the ABF. Excuse me. However, the funding is very, dependent on the key performance indicators that they set down for us, where we have to obtain medals, and obviously future funding is very dependent on that, and that's something we have to strive for. So the strategic goals that we're trying to obtain is obviously to maintain the quantity of bowlers, but not only that, the quality of bowlers within the associations, to maybe say so we can compete at national and international level. So therefore we have presently we're appointing talent development officers within this funding that we're being given by Sport NI, to try and get into schools, clubs, and to maybe encourage youth. But we also see that there's another element of, as I've mentioned there, the 35 plus age group, which maybe competitors from other sports feel that there is still a competitive sport they can get involved in, such as bowls, and then probably play at a fairly high level. We're trying to improve the coaches as well, so we have the highest level of coaching available to the players and to the clubs, with open days and academies that the clubs can organise. And also, finally, our communication systems, to feel that they have to be improved. And we've recently set up that we're getting new websites for quite a few of the associations to improve the image of the association. That's just a wee overview, gentlemen.
Great, thank you very much. That was very informative. I think all the members here will be eligible then to play bowls. Remember, we just squeeze in 35 plus, but we'll not go there, right? To death. You're obviously trying to increase the quantity and the quality of talented bowlers. That's one of your big goals. And how do you intend to do that? You had talking here about the development officer. These development officers are full time.
No, they'll be part-time posts.
Part-time, yeah. And you have to fund them then through
there is funding available through Sport NI for these two posts for the part-time.
They'll cover it?
With the two, by a geographic split, one will cover the south of the province and one will cover the north of the province, really. And hopefully they can get into the schools and arrange. Because that's the problem that we would have, that schools do not have this part of their curriculum. And whereas if you take a company like Australia, it is part of their schooling, and that's where the bowls start, and that's why they're so successful down there.
Yeah. So more by tradition, I suppose, here that that you're relying on. It's a problem. And as our communities, I suppose, get more and more sparse and spread out, it's more difficult to continue with that. So one of the challenges that you have to deal with. So coming from North Down, we're very much aware of the number of bowlers we have down in the North Down area, but I'm very much aware of the challenges. Premises obviously is a big challenge in relation to cost. And you say you don't play in council facilities generally?
Well, they are associations who play in the council premises.
Yes, but yours?
Sorry.
Does yours, Irish Bowling Association?
Oh yes, well, the clubs that we say within the association, all the leagues I mentioned there was the Northern Ireland Bowling Association. They mainly use council properties, such as, for example, if you're from North Down Ward Park.
Very much, yeah, aware of it, yeah.
Where there's 3 or 4 greens.
We talked about the Irish Bowling Association. Do they own a lot of their premises?
No, we're just the governing body which promotes and administers the clubs within the association.
Okay. And thanks very much. Okay, other members? Karen?
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. I do have a bowling background, not myself, but my mother and father-in-law both, all 3 play bowls, along with aunts and uncles, and they come into it maybe later in life.
Yes.
But they thoroughly enjoy it, both indoor and outdoor. My father-in-law is a president of Warrenpoint. At the minute, so we had President's Day. We were all involved and introduced the family, which was very enjoyable. And but I think there's nothing better than driving down to Newry, and at night time you'll see the Newry Bowling Outdoor Club lit up, and all the white gear and all on, and people enjoying the sport. But there's 40 clubs not affiliated to your association. Could you explain, is there disadvantages or advantages as to why they wouldn't be? Because to me, you're saying the sport's declining in numbers, but to me, coming from a rural area, it's one that I would see an increase in, particularly around South Down, where the bowls, indoor and outdoor, are growing. And there's Roisin Campbell from my own constituency is like a champion of whatever champion women's in Irish and stuff, great outdoor bowler. So we would see an increase in it. I was just wondering, why would people not affiliate to the association when there's 40 clubs? Do you know?
Well, I think there's probably 2 points. One, just taking that latter situation. the greatest increase has been in actually country and rural areas where councils actually have put in greens over the last 20 years, for example. I mean, Newry's around that stage. Orn Point was a fairly new green. There's a new green in Kilkeel actually too, which is very rarely played on. Don't be rushing me. But so the big increase has been in the rural areas, and the decline in bowls has probably been more so in Belfast than anywhere else. As the reason why clubs don't affiliate basically to the IBA, and we are looking at trying to change that, by the way, from next year on. We hope to bring in something which will make clubs have to be affiliated to us. But really it comes down to cost, and a lot of clubs, particularly with older membership, and people who aren't going to maybe be representing, for example, Ireland at internationals and so on, really don't particularly want to probably pay towards something they're not going to be involved in. But as I say, we do hope to basically change the situation and introduce some new things which will encourage clubs to affiliate if they are going to be playing in leagues.
Okay. The other one that you did mention about and touched on the development officer post and the Invest NI or Sport NI's contribution of £55,000 over last year and this year. And I'm sure that's helped us. You talked about the development of a website, and I'm sure that's within the spending of that 55,000. Have you considered the social media, like Facebook page and stuff, or have you got one? And it doesn't take as much, I suppose, viewing or control of it and management of it as what a web page.
Well, maybe I answer that one, Karen. We're just about to take on 2 part-time. We have funding for 1 full-time equivalent. So we had 2 very good candidates, so I've decided to take them both on a part-time basis. Gives us more coverage. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things we're developing, the 4 main governing bodies covering gents and ladies are improving their websites, and as part of that we are looking at Facebook and all those social media things that are going to be there. Obviously if you take a person, particularly on Facebook, talks about stuff, and it goes to a lot of people, and one of the things we have identified is we need to improve the image of bowls, because it is a 9 to 90 sport. It's not a 65 plus sport, it's a 9 to 90. Most of the international teams are all players 35 and younger. We've already mentioned in Australia where it's a really big sport, and a lot of the primary schools have leagues going, and there are a lot of kids who don't want to play football or rugby or gaelic or whatever, but they would really enjoy something like bowls, and it's one of those games. Try it. And a lot of people really enjoy it. Once they've tried it, they get into it. But it's getting them to try it in the first place. So obviously that's why we want these development officers to go into schools, the multi-sports clubs, help clubs run open days, taster days, whatever you would like to call them, to attract more people in to try the sport, and then hopefully to increase the membership.
Okay.
And the other thing, just to add to what Colin's saying, we also do find, particularly in my own club, which was in Guildford actually, that if you actually can get a group of young people in together, that they're more inclined to stay and play because they're friends and working together, whereas if you get 1 or 2 young people in, they're inclined to drift off again because of other sports and so on, because they want to be with their friends.
And it's also a great cross-community sport as well.
That's what I was going to.
People are. You never get asked what do you do or where are you from when you join a bowling club. Everybody's there to have fun and enjoy themselves. So it's a good sport for that too.
That was going to be my next. There's great cross-community, particularly around the South Down area. But there's also an awful competition about who serves the best tea and stuff after it as well. After their tournament or whatever it may be. But I wish you all the best, and thanks very much for coming and making the presentation to us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. William, you're next.
Thanks, Deputy Chair. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and for your presentation. I represent North Belfast, and we have a whole range of Salisbury, Castleton, Cave Hill, Forth River, North Belfast and Yurt. So we have a whole range of private green clubs as well as and many of our parks being used as well. So it's a sport that is widely played in my constituency. But there are a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, because I see here in terms of you've got funding for £55,000, 2013-2014. Is that the first time you've received funding?
No, over the last number of years we have been receiving funding from Sport NI, basically under the Athlete Improvement Programme, which was effectively for to send people to, for example, the World Championships and the different events. We actually were receiving grant aid towards those things, not towards our international team playing in the British Isles Championships, but just for as I say, things like the Commonwealth Games, World Championships. But now, last year, they have extended it to the international team as well for the British Isles.
And is that funding because Sport NI asked you to form this IBF? Did that unlock funding, do you think?
Sorry?
According to the brief I have here, IBF was created in 2013. Is it a coincidence that IBF was created in 2013 and in 2013 you get £55,000 from Sport NI? Do you think?
Well, it was. We had been in discussions with Sport NI for a period of time as to the format of bowls, and we did have the understanding that we would get some increased funding from them. The trouble is that funding is guaranteed for a very short period.
Absolutely, and don't worry, I'll come on to that. Because it seems to me, Chair, that you have 99 clubs that are affiliated that have 4,500 players. Have we any idea how many players have been in the 40 clubs that aren't affiliated? Approximately.
Approximately 1,500.
Right. So we're talking about 6,000 potential players in Northern Ireland, and Sport NI give you 55 grand for 1 year. Well, it could be read as 1 year. It's 2030, a financial year. Now, and if it's 2 years, is it 2 years? Or is it 1 year?
That's one.
1 year. 1 year. So, I have to say, I think there were concerns, and I think you were representatives from the bowling fraternity at the event we had last year, minority sports, you were along on it, and there was considerable concern raised. There is, and I say as someone who is very keen football supporter, but Gaelic sports, football and rugby get the vast bulk of the money that's going in. But there are 6,000 people who are taking part in bowling every week, and I think that's a derisory sum of money. The other point I'm going to make is this. It's interesting that it's tied into, if I'm right, medals. Right? Outside of boxing, bowling is the sport that brings in most medals in the Commonwealth Games consistently for Northern Ireland. So if you benchmark other sports the way this sport is being benchmarked, there would be a lot of sports that would be losing their funding or would be drastically cut, and I think that's grossly unfair, I have to say. And I think that's something which perhaps we should take up with Sport NI, Chair. You're absolutely right as well about younger people. Role models are key. If you look at when England won the Test match, going back, I think, to 2005, and Flintoff was, leading the charge. There were more England cricket shirts sold than England football shirts. And if you look at Rory McIlroy and golf in Northern Ireland, when I went to the boys' model, we played bowls at school because Jim Baker went to the boys' model, and he came back and we formed a bowling club. And that's what we need to have for bowls. There need to be a role model or role models in Northern Ireland for bowls, so that the sport could attract the young people. But I do think, Chair, I'll finish at that. But I do think there are a number of questions that we need to pursue, and given the number of people who are involved and participate, because the effect not just that they have in terms of sporting excellence, but in terms of participation and cross-community positivity that Ms McKevitt referred to as well. £55,000 money well spent, but it shouldn't be for 1 year, and it should be on an ongoing basis. And I think we need to pursue that on behalf of these gentlemen. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that was very informative. I think the point has been well made about the success within the Commonwealth Game. I think we'd congratulate you on all the work that you do. And obviously a lot of the work is volunteer, done by volunteers, done voluntary. And you know, that's a huge contribution in itself, and we fully recognise that. I think we would pass on our thanks and congratulations for all the efforts that you do make, and we do appreciate the good work that goes on within our communities, and we're very much aware of it. And just on the council thing that I mentioned earlier, what about engaging with councils? Is that a problem in trying to get resources locally and facilities, upgrade of facilities and so on?
I think most of the clubs are dealing with the councils themselves effectively.
Yes.
Where they are playing on council greens. There is some concern as to what effect the new council situation may have, and especially with the way funding is talked about, let's put it that way, and the current situation. There is some concern in some areas that will councils continue to basically pay for the upkeep of greens and so on, and I think that's something that is highly important if the game's to continue. In private clubs, there's no assistance at all towards upkeep of greens. That all has to be carried out and paid for by the members of the club, and it is quite a big expense in a private club to cover the cost of that. Estimation of the pure cost of keeping a green, upkeep of a green for a year is between £15,000 and £20,000. So there's a cost involved, and there's no assistance towards that from most councils. Now, a few councils have helped in instances where people have put in floodlights and so on. Some councils have helped towards that, but generally the capital funding side of bowls effectively doesn't exist.
Yeah, which is a challenge in itself.
Chair, can I just come back? Mr. Graham, you should be confident on the basis that these new 11 councils should have greater resource, not less. So they should actually be in a position, given the economies of scale and the rate base that they'll have, to be in a position to help you more. No.
I'm pleased to hear that.
But,
you heard it here first, huh?
Thanks very much, gentlemen. I hope you found that useful. But certainly you've raised the profile of your association here today, and thank you for your positive contribution. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Squeeze tight.
Under real pressure.
Just need to quickly go do that.
All the best.
Can you not just... I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Chair.
Right, over to Peter.
Chair, we do have other items, but I'm very conscious of the fact that we are low numbers and it's very late in the afternoon. So what we will do is we'll defer everything till next week. And if we move to adjourn now, if members are agreed, we still have 5 to agree that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, members. I appreciate it.
Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.